Rowan Thorne smoothed the ancient parchment before him, his quill poised. The scratching of other students' quills, the rustle of turning pages, and the distant murmur of Madame Pance's shushing were the familiar symphony of the Hogwarts library on a Tuesday evening. He was dissecting a particularly convoluted arithmancy equation for Professor Vector's advanced class, a challenge he relished. Logic, order, and empirical evidence, these were the cornerstones of his world, the bedrock upon which he built his impressive academic record. A fifth-year Ravenclaw, Rowan had long ago decided that the path to influence and respect in the wizarding world lay not in flashy duels or Quidditch heroics, but in the meticulous mastery of magical theory. He adjusted his spectacles, a frown creasing his brow. The solution wasn't quite aligning. He preferred to work in silence, but a soft, almost imperceptible hum had started to vibrate at the edge of his hearing. He dismissed it as a trick of the light, perhaps the old enchanted lamps in the archives section flickering. Yet it persisted, a faint, metallic thrumming that seemed to emanate from the very stone around him. A sudden, sharp shiver ran down his spine. It wasn't the usual chill of the old castle. This was a deep, bone-pricking cold that seemed to originate from within. He glanced around. No windows were open. The grand fireplace at the far end of the library crackled cheerfully, its warmth usually sufficient. He pulled his robes tighter, dismissing it as a simple draft, an anomaly in the castle's ancient heating charms. Even Hogwarts, for all its magic, wasn't immune to the occasional quirk. His gaze fell upon Luna Lovegood, perched precariously atop a stack of forgotten astrological charts near a dusty bay window. Her silvery blonde hair cascaded around her, and her radial spectre specs were pushed up on her nose, giving her an even more ethereal appearance than usual. She wasn't reading. Instead, her head was tilted, her pale eyes fixed on a spot just above the shelf of ancient runes, a faint, almost imperceptible tremor running through her frame. "Are you quite all right, Luna?" he asked, his voice low, a polite but firm undertone of "don't bother me" implied. Luna slowly turned her head, her dreamy eyes meeting his. "Oh, hello, Rowan. I'm perfectly fine. Just observing." She paused, a thoughtful hum escaping her lips. "The blurs are getting thicker tonight. They make the air feel like ice, and the whispers so much louder." Rowan sighed, pushing his spectacles higher on his nose. "Blurs, Luna? Are we talking about dust motes in the light again? Or perhaps the residual magical energy from Madame Pance's latest ward polishing?" He tried to keep his tone neutral, but a hint of exasperation inevitably seeped in. He respected Luna's uniqueness, but her penchant for seeing invisible creatures and intangible phenomena was a frequent distraction from his scholarly pursuits. Luna merely blinked. "No, Rowan. Not dust motes. These are different. They make the light dimmer, not brighter. And the whispers, they sound like secrets that want to be heard, but nobody wants to say." She lowered her head slightly, her gaze returning to the empty space. "They're gathering. I can feel them." Another shiver, more profound this time, snaked up Rowan's neck. He consciously ignored it, attributing it to the draft he'd already acknowledged. "Luna, Hogwarts has stood for over 1,000 years. Its wards are among the strongest in the world. Whatever blurs or whispers you perceive are likely products of your own vivid imagination. Perhaps you've been spending too much time near the divination classroom." A few fifth-year Hufflepuffs at a nearby table snickered softly, glancing at Luna. Rowan felt a flicker of annoyance. He hadn't meant to invite ridicule, just to politely disengage. Luna, however, seemed oblivious. She merely offered a small, knowing smile. "Sometimes, Rowan, the things we can't imagine are the most real." He huffed, returning to his arithmancy, determined to ignore her. But the metallic thrumming seemed to grow infinitesimally louder, and the cold, though still fleeting, became more insistent. He found himself periodically glancing towards the ceiling, then towards the forgotten archives, a strange sense of unease starting to prick at the edges of his logical mind. He blamed it on concentration fatigue. Over the next few days, the subtle shifts Luna had noted became incrementally more pronounced, spreading beyond the library. In the Great Hall, during breakfast, a sudden pocket of icy air would sweep through a section of tables, making students gasp and pull their robes tighter, even as the roaring, enchanted ceiling fire above blazed. Candles in the common rooms sometimes guttered without explanation, their flames shrinking to faint sparks before flaring back to life with unnatural vigor. Whispers, faint as a moth's wings against glass, seemed to follow students down deserted corridors, making them spin around, only to find nothing. Rowan, ever the rationalist, found himself cataloging these incidents. A faulty heating charm, perhaps a systemic issue exacerbated by the castle's age. The flickering lights? Old magic, bound to wear out occasionally. The whispers? Just the wind, amplified by the castle's acoustics, or perhaps students' imaginations running wild from stress. After all, newts were looming and the pressure was palpable. Yet, he couldn't shake the growing unease. He observed his classmates. Even the most boisterous Gryffindors seemed a little subdued. The usually cheerful Hufflepuffs were more prone to jump at shadows. Ravenclaws, typically immersed in their studies, exchanged nervous glances. And the Slytherins, they were unusually quiet, their usual snide remarks replaced by a palpable tension. One afternoon, during a charms class with Professor Flitwick, the air in the usually vibrant classroom grew heavy and still. A quill, mid-flight from a levitation charm, suddenly plummeted to the floor, clattering loudly. The light from the windows dimmed perceptibly, as if a cloud had passed over the sun, though the sky outside remained clear. Professor Flitwick, usually unflappable, paused mid-sentence. His small hands, usually so agile, trembled slightly. "Class, is anyone else feeling an unusual chill?" he squeaked, his voice higher than usual. A chorus of nervous murmurs rose from the students. Rowan felt the cold again, a creeping dread that seemed to seep into his bones, far more potent than any draft. His logical mind screamed atmospheric pressure change or ward malfunction, but a primal part of him registered something else. Something hostile. He saw Luna Lovegood, seated serenely in the front row, close her eyes for a moment, a faint frown on her face. When she opened them, she looked directly at Rowan, her expression devoid of its usual dreaminess, replaced by something akin to solemn understanding. "They're getting closer," her gaze seemed to say. Rowan looked away, a prickle of irritation mixing with the inexplicable dread. He couldn't let Luna's nonsense infect his own rational thought. He focused on the quill on the floor, trying to mentally identify the exact magical malfunction that would cause such a thing. Was it an arcane resonance? A localized ward drain? But the cold persisted, and the silence that followed Flitwick's question was thick, suffocating. The air seemed to hold its breath. Then, just as suddenly, the chill receded, the light brightened, and the quill on the floor seemed to shimmer faintly with residual magic. Well, Professor Flitwick cleared his throat, adjusting his bow tie. Perhaps just a momentary fluctuation in the castle's ambient magic. Nothing to worry about, I'm sure. Now, back to our featherlight charms. He tried to sound cheerful, but his eyes darted nervously around the room, settling for a moment on the darkest corner. Later that evening, Rowan sought refuge in his common room, trying to work on his transfiguration essay. He needed to focus. His grades were suffering, even slightly, due to this pervasive, unsettling atmosphere. He told himself it was just a psychological effect, mass hysteria, perhaps, brought on by the end-of-year stress. He was sitting near one of the large arched windows overlooking the grounds, the cool night air usually a balm to his overactive mind. Tonight, however, the air felt heavy. The enchanted ceiling, usually a swirling canvas of stars and constellations, seemed duller, the light it cast muted. A book on a nearby shelf suddenly tumbled down, hitting the floor with a dull thud. Rowan jumped, startled, his heart hammering against his ribs. He spun around, wand already half drawn. It was an ancient tome on obscure dark arts, one rarely touched. It lay open on the floor, its yellowed pages splayed. Rowan felt a knot tighten in his stomach. He hadn't been near that shelf. No one else was in this corner of the common room. He walked over, cautiously, his wand now fully gripped. He knelt, peering at the book. It was open to a chapter titled Echoes of the Void, non-corporeal entities, and the mind. He frowned, his logical mind immediately trying to find a mundane explanation. A weak shelf charm? A draft, somehow strong enough to dislodge a heavy book? He reached out to close it, his fingers brushing against the ancient vellum. A whisper, cold and sharp as ice, slithered directly into his ear. It wasn't a language he recognized, but the tone, it was a malicious hiss, filled with an ancient, unbearable hunger. A wave of profound terror, unlike anything he had ever experienced, washed over him, momentarily paralyzing him. He gasped, scrambling back, his wand clattering to the floor. His breath caught in his throat, and he could feel his heart attempting to hammer its way out of his chest. The air around the open book grew unnaturally dark, a shimmering distortion, like heat haze but colder, far colder. He could feel it pressing in, an invisible, crushing weight. He squeezed his eyes shut, trying to fight the overwhelming fear, the sense of being utterly helpless and exposed. When he dared to open them again, the distortion was gone. The cold receded, leaving behind a faint, lingering scent of ozone and something rotten. The book lay innocently on the floor, still open. The silence that followed was deafening, the magical light from the ceiling seeming to dim further, casting long, wavering shadows across the common room. Rowan stared at the book, then at his trembling hands. His rational mind had nothing, absolutely nothing to explain what had just happened. This wasn't a draft. This wasn't a faulty charm. This was something else. Something utterly terrifying. He thought of Luna, of her blurs, and her insistent warnings. A chilling realization began to dawn on him, one that shattered the comfortable walls of his skepticism. What if she was right? What if something truly malevolent had taken root in Hogwarts? He felt a desperate need to find her, to ask her, to understand what he had just experienced. Because for the first time in his life, Rowan Thorne was genuinely afraid, and logic offered no solace. The bleak veil had indeed begun to descend. The biting cold was the first thing Rowan noticed, long before any unsettling whispers or flickering shadows. It wasn't the usual chill of a drafty castle corridor in late autumn, but an unnatural, piercing cold that seemed to suck the warmth directly from the air, leaving a void. It had started subtly, a shiver here, a sudden goosebump there, easily dismissed. But now, as Rowan strode through the bustling charms corridor, the temperature plummeted in a specific 10-foot stretch, causing students to visibly flinch, wrap their robes tighter, and hurry past, their chatter dying to murmurs. Rowan felt it too, a prickling sensation on his skin, a tightness in his chest. He tightened his grip on the strap of his satchel, his Ravenclaw common room key digging into his palm. Just a faulty warming charm, perhaps, he muttered, adjusting his spectacles. Or the stones retaining heat poorly after the weather change. But his internal explanation felt flimsy even to him. Hogwarts' ancient wards were renowned for their stability. A localized, intense cold spot like this, appearing randomly in different parts of the castle, was unprecedented. The casual dismissal of Luna Lovegood's Nargles and blurs felt increasingly hollow. Lately, the incidents were too widespread, too consistent to be dismissed as mere imagination or collective hysteria. Only yesterday, a pair of first-year Hufflepuffs had refused to enter the potions classroom, sobbing about evil whispers from the dungeon's shadows. Professor Slughorn, looking flustered and bewildered, had sent them to the infirmary, prescribing a calming draught. But even Madame Pomfrey seemed more perplexed than usual. "It's getting worse, isn't it?" A soft voice drifted from behind him. Rowan sighed, knowing before he turned it would be Luna. She stood a few paces away, her radish earrings swaying gently, her large blue eyes fixed not on him, but on the cold spot ahead, a faint frown marring her otherwise serene expression. She wasn't wearing her usual bright colors today, opting for a muted gray robe that seemed to absorb the light, making her appear almost spectral. "Lovegood," Rowan said, trying to inject his usual academic authority into his voice. "Are you still harping on about your blurs? Surely you can see this is merely a localized drop in temperature, probably due to some ancient thermal regulation system malfunctioning." Luna turned her gaze to him, a faint, sad smile playing on her lips. "They're not just blurs anymore, Rowan. They're sharpening. And they're hungry. The cold is them trying to take a bite out of our warmth, our magic. Listen closely. Rowan scoffed, but a tremor of unease still ran through him. Listen to what, Lovegood? The sound of my own common sense. Just then, a Gryffindor 5th year, Seamus Finnegan, strode confidently into the cold patch, attempting a simple Lumos charm to light his wand tip. The usual bright glow faltered, flickering weakly before sputtering out, leaving a trail of black smoke. Seamus stared at his wand in dismay, then at his hand. He tried again, his brow furrowed in concentration. Nothing. His face, usually ruddy and cheerful, paled noticeably. What in Merlin's beard? He muttered, backing out of the cold zone, his eyes wide with a fear that wasn't just embarrassment. As Seamus quickly retreated, a faint, almost inaudible whisper seemed to brush past Rowan's ear, so fleeting he might have imagined it. Weak, so weak, it was a sound like dry leaves skittering on stone, yet with an insidious, sibilant quality that made the hairs on his neck stand on end. Rowan's logical fortress wavered. This wasn't a malfunction. This was an attack. Or at least, an interference. He looked at Luna, who was now nodding slowly, her eyes distant, as if observing something far beyond the visible spectrum. The whispers are getting clearer, she said, her voice barely above a whisper herself. They feed on doubt, on fear. They make magic harder, especially for those who are already scared. It's like a dampening field, but not one cast by a spell. It's inside the fear. Rowan felt a chill that had nothing to do with the cold spot. Inside the fear? What in the name of Merlin are you talking about, Lovegood? They're trying to empty us, Luna explained, her voice surprisingly steady, so they can fill us with themselves. The blurs were just scouts, but now they're settling in. They like the shadows, the forgotten places. And the fear of not being able to cast a simple charm is a delicious feast for them. He watched other students pass the cold spot, their faces etched with varying degrees of apprehension. A group of Ravenclaw 4th years huddled together, exchanging worried glances. He even saw a normally boisterous Slytherin prefect, Theodore Knott's younger cousin, flinch and hurry past, clutching his wand like a lifeline. Paranoia was spreading like a cursed contagion. Classes were being cut short, students were sticking in larger groups, and the Great Hall, usually buzzing with life, now had an undercurrent of nervous quiet. His own thoughts, usually sharp and ordered, felt muddied, disturbed. This was beyond the scope of any prank, beyond any known dark magic. He prided himself on understanding the mechanics of magic, on being able to deduce the underlying principles. But this felt ancient, primal. All right, Lovegood, Rowan said, his voice clipped, a strange blend of exasperation and genuine intrigue. If these blurs or whispers or whatever you call them are so active, show me. Lead the way to where they're sharpening. He didn't believe her, not entirely, but he needed data. He needed to prove her wrong, or, a terrifying thought, prove her right. His logical mind needed answers, and if Luna's strange perceptions were the only lead, he would, begrudgingly, follow. Luna's eyes lit up, a flicker of hope amidst the quiet despair that seemed to cling to her. Of course, Rowan. I knew you'd see it, eventually. They're congregating in the less-used corridors, near the old dungeons, and the library annex, especially the restricted section's lower levels. They like old secrets. Rowan swallowed, remembering the whispered warnings he'd overheard about students feeling watched in the library, or sensing eyes in the dark corners of forgotten classrooms. He had dismissed them as overactive imaginations. Now he wasn't so sure. The library annex, then, he decided, taking charge. It's public enough that we won't get into trouble for wandering, but isolated enough that it might exhibit patterns. He deliberately avoided using Luna's terminology. They set off, a curious pair, the prim, logical Ravenclaw, dragging his feet but moving with purpose, and the ethereal Luna, gliding beside him with an air of knowing serenity. As they neared the library annex, the air grew noticeably cooler, the grand tapestries along the walls seeming to absorb the light rather than reflect it. The familiar scent of old parchment and dust was overlaid with something metallic, something like rust and a faint, cloying sweetness. Do you smell that? Rowan asked, his nose twitching. Luna nodded. It's the fear. The entity's presence changes the air. It thickens it like a fog of dread. And the whispers, they're much louder here. Rowan listened, straining his ears. At first, nothing but the usual creaks and groans of the ancient castle. Then a low, guttural murmur, too faint to distinguish words, yet undeniably present. It seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere at once, a chorus of barely their voices, like 1,000 insects buzzing just beyond his hearing. It made his skin crawl. They want to isolate you, Luna continued, her voice unwavering. Make you feel alone. That's when they can truly reach inside. They entered the annex, a vast, echoing space filled with towering shelves of forgotten tomes. Dust motes danced in the slivers of weak sunlight filtering through the high, arched windows. The cold here was even more pronounced, raising goosebumps on Rowan's arms. He felt a growing sense of vulnerability, a strange, creeping fear that was not entirely his own. There, Luna whispered, pointing a slender finger towards a narrow aisle tucked between two towering bookcases. A particularly strong one. It's been bothering students who try to study the ancient runic texts. Rowan, trying to maintain his scientific objectivity, cautiously approached the designated aisle. He drew his wand, not out of any particular plan, but from instinct. As he stepped between the shelves, the temperature dropped abruptly, plunging him into a zone of absolute frigidity. His breath plumed in front of him. A shiver racked his body, deeper than mere cold. It felt like an intrusion, a violation of his personal space. Then, the whispers intensified. They weren't just a distant murmur now. They were close, right next to his ear, weaving a tapestry of insidious sound. You're a fraud, a hollow shell. No one cares. They only pity your intellect. Failure awaits you, just like your family. The voices were insidious, cutting directly to his deepest insecurities, his fear of not being good enough, of his family's struggles, of his academic facade crumbling. His wand arm trembled. This wasn't some generic fear-mongering. It was specific, tailored to him. Rowan squeezed his eyes shut for a moment, gripping his wand tighter, trying to push back the onslaught of self-doubt. When he opened them, something flickered at the edge of his vision. A shape, darker than the shadows, taller and gaunter than any human, darted behind a shelf. He blinked. It was gone. Did you see that? He choked out, his voice hoarse, his logical mind screaming for him to dismiss it as an optical illusion. Luna was standing at the entrance to the aisle, her expression still serene, but her eyes held a new depth of concern. It saw you, Rowan. It knows your fears. It's learning. Rowan stumbled back, almost tripping over a loose floorboard. The whispers receded, the cold eased slightly, but the lingering dread remained, a bitter taste in his mouth. He was no longer trying to rationalize. He was afraid. This was real. Whatever Luna called it, it was here, it was malignant, and it was getting stronger. And it knew him. What was that? He asked, his voice barely a whisper, turning to Luna, his academic superiority shattered. It knew things. Luna's gaze was unsettlingly direct. It reads the deep parts of you, Rowan. The places you hide even from yourself. It finds the cracks. This isn't just a blur anymore. This is Valak. Her voice was soft, but the name resonated with an ancient, chilling power that made Rowan's blood run cold. The unsettling undercurrent of dread that had been a persistent hum in the castle's ancient stones now threatened to erupt into a full-blown scream. Rowan, usually immune to the superstitious whispers of his peers, found his meticulously constructed logical framework beginning to crack. The cold spots Luna had warned of were no longer isolated incidents. They materialized in the middle of crowded corridors, sending students scattering with sudden shivers and gasps, their breath misting in the sudden chill. Whispers followed, not just the usual dormitory gossip, but fragmented, disembodied echoes that seemed to prey on individual anxieties, a forgotten homework assignment, a looming exam, a friend's casual slight. Classes, once lively debates, were now punctuated by long silences. Even Professor Binns, in his spectral monotone, seemed to acknowledge the shift, his lessons on goblin rebellions feeling eerily topical to the underlying unrest. Rowan observed it all, recording every data point in his mind. The flicker of lights in the Great Hall, the sudden inexplicable drop in temperature in the library that sent shivers down his spine even when he wore his thickest robes, the fleeting shadow that seemed to dart just beyond his peripheral vision in the astronomy tower. He tried to attribute them to faulty wiring, drafty corridors, or lack of sleep, but the explanations felt increasingly hollow, like a poorly conjured illusion. Luna, however, seemed to thrive in this atmosphere of encroaching chaos. Her eyes, usually dreamily distant, now held a sharp, focused intensity. She moved through the corridors with an almost preternatural awareness, occasionally pausing to gaze intently at an empty space, her expression a mix of sorrow and understanding. "They're getting bolder, Rowan," she murmured one afternoon in the Ravenclaw common room, sketching what looked like an ethereal, wavering silhouette in the margins of a copy of the Quibbler. "The blurs are almost solid now, feeding." Rowan merely grunted, pretending to engross himself in an essay on advanced transfiguration, but his heart had begun to beat a little faster at her words. He had seen a similar blur earlier that morning, a murky ripple in the air above a sleeping student in the common room, accompanied by a wave of cold that had made him pull his blanket tighter. He had dismissed it as an effect of the firelight. But Luna's words planted a seed of doubt. The true breaking point came during lunch in the Great Hall. The usual clatter of cutlery and lively chatter was already subdued, replaced by an uneasy murmur. Suddenly, a piercing scream tore through the air. It came from the Hufflepuff table, a first-year girl named Penelope Featherstone. She was pointing, eyes wide with terror, at the empty space beside her, her usually rosy face ashen. Her hand, trembling violently, dropped a pumpkin pasty, which rolled forgotten across the table. It touched me," she shrieked, scrambling back, overturning her goblet of pumpkin juice. "It whispered, my nightmares. It knows." A ripple of horror spread through the hall. Professor McGonagall, who had been conversing quietly with Professor Flitwick, was on her feet in an instant, wand drawn. "Miss Featherstone, what is the meaning of this?" But Penelope was beyond coherent explanation. She started hyperventilating, her small body convulsing, tears streaming down her face. Her breathing became ragged, and her eyes rolled back into her head as she collapsed, rigid, into the arms of the nearest prefect. A hush fell, heavy and absolute. The magical candlelight above flickered wildly, casting dancing shadows that seemed to mock their fear. Rowan felt a cold dread seep into his bones, colder than any localized temperature drop. This wasn't a prank. This wasn't a draft. This wasn't mass hysteria. Penelope was genuinely terrified, physically affected by something unseen. His logical mind, usually so quick to find an explanation, drew a terrifying blank. The rational facade he had so carefully maintained shattered. Professor McGonagall quickly conjured a stretcher and, with the help of Madame Pomfrey, levitated the unconscious Penelope out of the hall. But the damage was done. Fear, palpable and suffocating, settled over the students like a shroud. Conversations ceased entirely. Students picked at their food, darting fearful glances at every shadow. Rowan found Luna's eyes across the hall. Hers were filled with a profound sadness. "The blurs made her see her deepest fear," she said, her voice carrying clearly in the sudden silence, though her lips barely moved. "They want to feed. They want to grow." Later that evening, the Ravenclaw common room was unusually quiet. Rowan, unable to focus on anything, found himself pacing. He needed answers, and conventional wisdom wasn't providing them. He had dismissed Luna, but she had been right, terrifyingly so, about the escalating nature of the presence. He needed someone who could bridge the gap between abstract intuition and tangible knowledge. His thoughts turned to Professor Septima Vector. A genius in arithmancy, she dealt with patterns, numbers, and the esoteric underpinnings of magic. If there was a pattern to this terror, a way to quantify its effects or origins, she would find it. He found her in her office, bathed in the soft glow of numerous magical charts and self-adjusting abacuses. She peered at him over the rim of her half-moon spectacles, her expression sharp. "Mr. Thorne, Not like you to seek me out without an arithmancy query or a proposed theorem on numerical magical causality. Rowan took a deep breath. Professor, I need your help with something entirely different. Something I believe transcends conventional magical understanding. He recounted the incident with Penelope, his voice surprisingly steady despite the tremor in his hands. He described the cold spots, the whispers, the shadows, even his own grudging acceptance of Luna Lovegood's initial warnings. He omitted the word Nargles entirely, opting instead for unseen presences. Professor Vector listened intently, her brow furrowed. Her gaze, however, wasn't dismissive. I have observed certain anomalies, she admitted, tapping a stylus against a complex chart. Student arithmancy scores, particularly among the younger years, have shown a concerning downward trend beyond simple examination stress. There are also subtle fluctuations in the castle's ambient magical energy grid that defy explanation by the standard warding schematics. I initially attributed it to residual magical echoes from the recent war, or perhaps a faulty ley line. But a student collapsing from fear of an unseen entity, that does lend credence to Miss Lovegood's rather persistent, if abstract, observations. Luna believes this entity feeds on fear, Rowan said, testing the waters. Professor Vector considered this, her eyes narrowing. A fascinating hypothesis. And one that, from a certain perspective, could align with my data. Fear, particularly mass fear, generates a distinct energy signature. If an entity were to exploit such a thing, it would leave a quantifiable trace. She stood, moving towards a towering bookshelf filled with ancient, leather-bound tomes. While such a creature is outside the realm of standard dark arts curriculum, there exist ancient texts that delve into entities not easily classified by conventional spellcraft. She pulled out a massive, dusty book with a tarnished silver clasp, its title faded beyond recognition. It felt impossibly cold in her hands, even through her thick robes. This particular volume is an archaic compendium of spiritus malignum, or malevolent spirits, from various cultures, compiled by a rather eccentric medieval archmage named Eldrin Pyre. He was known for his unconventional theories on non-corporeal entities. She laid the book on a wide, oak table, dusting off centuries of grime. The pages, brittle and yellowed, rustled as she opened it. Drawings of grotesque creatures and strange sigils filled the margins. Pyre believed that some entities existed entirely outside the magical spectrum we understand, feeding on raw emotion, manifesting only in the presence of extreme psychological distress. He documented several such cases, often dismissed as mass delusion or hysteria by his contemporaries. Rowan leaned closer, a strange mixture of apprehension and intellectual curiosity gripping him. This was exactly the kind of academic pursuit he thrived on, even if the subject matter made his skin crawl. Look here, Professor Vector said, tracing a finger across a complex, faded diagram depicting a shadowy figure with elongated limbs, its face obscured by a cowl. Beside it, ancient Latin script, adorned with intricate, almost organic-looking symbols. Pyre describes a spiritus umbra, a shadow spirit, that manifests as a chilling dread, stealing light and warmth, and preys upon the anxieties of the living, growing stronger with each drop of fear it imbibes. Rowan felt a knot tighten in his stomach. The description was chillingly accurate. He glanced at Luna, who had quietly joined them, her gaze fixed intently on the page. Her face was pale, but her eyes held a spark of recognition. Professor Vector continued, translating a particularly dense passage. It speaks of an entity that takes on the visage of that which the victim most fears, to utterly break the will and consume the soul. And here, a name, or rather, a descriptive epithet, recurring through several entries. She paused, her eyes widening slightly as she deciphered the ancient script. It's referred to as the Bleak Nun, or in some older variations, Valak, the Defiler of Souls. Rowan stared at the name, a cold dread far worse than any chill settling deep in his bones. Valak, the Defiler of Souls. It wasn't just a fear, it was a being. A powerful, terrifying demonic entity, right here in Hogwarts. The realization hit him with the force of a full-body blasting curse. His worst fears were suddenly given a horrifying name. The chill that now clung to Hogwarts wasn't merely atmospheric, it was a psychological weight, pressing down on every student, every professor. The student who had been found catatonic in the defense against the dark arts classroom, muttering incoherently about cold eyes and things in the dark, was the final, undeniable proof. No one, not even the most skeptical Hufflepuff, could dismiss the growing terror any longer. Fear, a palpable entity, permeated the ancient stone, and it was the fuel for whatever haunted them. Rowan Thorne felt the tendrils of that fear, too. It was a cold knot in his stomach, a prickle at the back of his neck whenever he walked down a deserted corridor. But the fear, paradoxically, had sharpened his mind. The academic challenge had transformed into an urgent quest, and his previous disdain for the unexplainable had transmuted into a desperate need for answers. He no longer viewed Luna's perceptions as nonsense, but as distorted, invaluable clues. He found Professor Vector in her arithmancy classroom, the air thick with the scent of parchment and old ink. Equations covered the blackboards, but these weren't typical arithmancy calculations. They were complex matrices charting fluctuations in the castle's ambient magical energy, correlating spikes of dark, undefined influence with the locations of recent incidents. Luna sat perched on a desk, humming a tuneless melody, her wide eyes occasionally darting to the arcane symbols Vector had painstakingly copied from the ancient text they'd liberated from the restricted section. "Professor, any breakthroughs?" Rowan asked, his voice tight. Vector pushed a stray strand of gray hair from her brow, her spectacles glinting. "The patterns are disturbing, Mr. Thorne. This entity operates on a distinct frequency, almost a negative resonance that disrupts the natural magical flow. It's not just dark magic, it's an anti-magic in some ways, absorbing and distorting rather than merely casting." She gestured to a series of glyphs. "These symbols, from the text you brought, are proving particularly recalcitrant. They seem to describe the entity's nature, but the language is a dead tongue, interwoven with runic allegories." Rowan moved closer, scrutinizing the intricate script. "I've been cross-referencing similar ancient languages, focusing on magical theory texts from the 10th and 11th centuries. There's a passage here." He pointed to a series of heavily stylized characters. "That speaks of shadows that wear borrowed skin and fear as their truest form. But the name, if there is one, remains elusive." Luna, who had been uncharacteristically quiet, finally spoke, her voice dreamy but clear. "It has cold eyes, like a storm cloud before the lightning. And it smells of old dust and forgotten screams." Her fingers traced a particular symbol on the ancient parchment. "This one. It means hollow. Like a place where magic used to be, but isn't anymore." Vector looked at Luna, a flicker of something akin to awe in her usually analytical gaze. "Hollow. You might be onto something, Miss Lovegood." She tapped the same symbol with her wand. "Rowan, in the section on entities that feed on despair, there are references to a name that cannot be spoken aloud in the light, lest it gather strength." Rowan's mind raced. "So, a name that's concealed, or that has a forbidden aspect to it." He remembered a concept from an obscure charms history text. Certain ancient rituals used a true name for binding, but also for summoning. What if the name isn't just hidden, but encrypted within the very description of its nature? Vector nodded slowly. "Precisely. The arithmantic sequence related to its destructive effect, combined with the allegories Luna is perceiving. Give me a moment." She began a flurry of calculations, her wand tapping equations onto the blackboard, the numbers shifting and rearranging themselves with dizzying speed. Minutes stretched, punctuated only by the scratching of chalk and the distant, muffled sounds of a Hogwarts trying to feign normalcy. Rowan felt his heart pound against his ribs, a mixture of terror and exhilarating intellectual pursuit. Then, Vector gasped. Her eyes, wide behind her spectacles, fixed on a complex array of numbers and symbols. There. The pattern converges. It describes a being of pure malevolence, non-corporeal, preying on fear, capable of mimicry and emotional distortion, and its name. It's a name from ancient demonology, one thought banished centuries ago. Her voice was barely a whisper. Valak. Rowan felt a cold dread wash over him that transcended mere fear. Valak. He'd read about it in hushed tones in obscure texts, often dismissed as folklore or exaggerations. A powerful demonic entity associated with knowledge of hidden treasures, but far more terrifyingly, with the ability to possess and corrupt. Luna, however, showed no surprise. Valak. Yes, it's been here before, hasn't it? Long ago. The Nargles know it. She shivered lightly. It wants to be here permanently this time. Permanently. Rowan felt a surge of adrenaline. But Hogwarts wards, they're impregnable. Nothing like this could ever establish a foothold. That's where the other part of the text comes in, Vector said, her voice regaining some of its professorial composure, though tinged with grave concern. This entity, Valak, is described as seeking ancient vulnerabilities, fissures in the foundation of sacred ground. My arithmancy calculations, mapping the magical drain, show a particular anomaly. A point where the castle's warding energy isn't just disrupted, but leaking. She pointed to a section of her blackboard where a spectral map of Hogwarts shimmered with a single, pulsing red dot deep beneath the grounds, far below the dungeons. A breach, Rowan breathed. A forgotten breach in Hogwarts' oldest foundational wards. His mind flashed back to a Ravenclaw lecture on Hogwarts' earliest construction, theories about ancient runic stones predating even the founders themselves. A place where the magic of the land itself connects to the castle's wards, a spot so old it might have been overlooked in subsequent ward reinforcement. Precisely, Vector confirmed. And the texts, they hint at its nature. Not a physical hole, but a weakening, a spiritual wound where the protective magic thins. It's described as the Crypt of Whispers, or the Unsealed Chamber. A place of forgotten power, now turned into an open wound. Luna nodded sagely. It's very dark there. Like a forgotten dream. The rack spurts are thick, making everything feel heavy and sad. The texts also describe a way to repel it, Vector continued, her finger tracing another section of the ancient parchment. Not destroy, for such entities are not easily destroyed, but to banish and seal. A counter-ritual. It speaks of the light of pure intent, symbols of defiance woven with courage, and a sacrifice of self-doubt. It requires a nexus of focused magical energy, powered by an individual's will. Rowan felt a chill that had nothing to do with Valak. A sacrifice of self-doubt, and powered by an individual's will. What does that mean? It means, Vector said gravely, that conventional spells and group enchantments won't work. This entity feeds on fear, doubt, and division. To banish it, one must be utterly resolute, fearless in intent, and willing to confront their own inner darkness to project an unbreakable light. She looked pointedly at Rowan. It also speaks of using specific ancient symbols of warding, drawn with a blood quill, and incantations that resonate with the very foundation of magical protection. It's a ritual of incredible power, but also incredible risk. Rowan stared at the pulsing red dot on Vector's map, deep within the foundations of his beloved school. The Crypt of Whispers. The Unsealed Chamber. Valak's entry point. The truth hit him with the force of a bludgeon. His rigid logic, his dismissiveness, had almost allowed a demon to claim Hogwarts. His academic pursuit had suddenly become a fight for survival, for the very soul of the school. The counter-ritual, he said, his voice firm despite the tremor of fear deep inside him. We need to prepare. Now. What does it require? Vector flipped a page, her expression grim. It requires unwavering resolve, Mr. Thorne, and a complete understanding of its components. The text indicates that failure would not merely mean the ritual's collapse, but a permanent strengthening of Valak's hold over the castle, potentially sealing its presence here forever. She paused, her gaze meeting his. Are you prepared for such a task, Rowan? To face your deepest fears, to lead this against an entity that thrives on them. Rowan looked at Luna, who was now gazing out the window, a faint, knowing smile on her lips, as if seeing something beyond the castle walls, something only she could truly perceive. He thought of the terrified students, the cold dread, the knowledge that an ancient evil lurked beneath them, feeding on their despair. He thought of his own initial skepticism, his need for control, his carefully constructed facade of intellectual superiority. All of it felt trivial now. "I have to be," Rowan said, his jaw set. "We all have to be." He turned back to the ancient text, his finger hovering over the complex symbols of the banishing ritual. The Crypt of Whispers, Valak's entry point, awaited them, and within its ancient darkness, the ultimate test of his courage, his logic, and his newfound trust in the unconventional. The fate of Hogwarts, veiled in bleak terror, now rested on their desperate, perilous journey into the castle's deepest, most forgotten secrets. The air in the forgotten crypt, deep beneath Hogwarts, was a living entity of dread, a suffocating shroud that clung to their skin and burrowed into their minds. Cold sweat trickled down Rowan Thorne's spine, a stark contrast to the burning intensity of his focus. Before them, where the ancient stone met a jagged crack in the castle's deepest foundations, pulsed a wound in reality itself, the breach through which Valak had manifested. It wasn't just a physical fissure, it was a swirling vortex of shadow and whispers, emanating an absolute, primordial cold that seemed to drain the very warmth from their souls. Professor Vector, her face etched with grim determination, meticulously drew the final strokes of a complex runic circle in glowing white chalk around the breach. Ancient implements, a small, worn mortar and pestle, a vial of luminescent dust, and a gnarled, obsidian wand, lay beside her. Her usual crisp posture was slightly stooped under the psychic weight of Valak's presence. Luna Lovegood stood a few paces back, her wide, silvery eyes fixed on the pulsating tear. She wasn't trembling, but a faint, almost imperceptible shimmer around her indicated the immense mental effort she was exerting. "It's agitated," she murmured, her voice a soft counterpoint to the thrumming dread. "Like a wasp in a jar. It knows we're here to stop its game." Rowan clutched his wand, his knuckles white. His logical mind screamed at the impossibility of it all, yet the icy dread gnawing at his courage was undeniable. This wasn't a problem to be solved with equations or established spellcraft. It was a battle against something that fed on the very fabric of fear. He looked at Luna, her quiet resilience a startling beacon in the oppressive gloom. He had once scoffed at her Nargles. Now he saw Valak through her eyes, a terrifying, amorphous entity of pure malevolence, constantly shifting, probing, testing their resolve. And for the first time, he found himself not just trusting her, but relying on her. "All right," Rowan said, his voice surprisingly steady, betraying little of the tumult within him. He took a deep breath, the stale air tasting like dust and despair. "Professor Luna, we know the ritual. Vector, you guide the incantations and the runic sequence. Luna, you're our eyes. Tell us every move it makes, every subtle shift. I'll channel the protective and banishing magic. We have one shot at this." Vector nodded, her gaze firm. The text speaks of a concentrated act of will, imbued with specific counterrunes. It's not about power, Rowan, but intent. Purity of purpose. And courage, Luna added softly, her gaze meeting Rowan's. It wants to make us doubt ourselves. That's how it gets in. Vector began to chant, her voice low and resonant, ancient words echoing in the crypt. As each syllable left her lips, the runes she'd drawn flared with a cool, blue light, slowly connecting to form a glowing barrier around the breach. Rowan felt a familiar magical hum course through his wand, but it was accompanied by an unfamiliar, chilling resistance. Valak was already fighting back. The temperature plummeted further, making their teeth chatter. Disembodied whispers slithered from the breach, caressing their minds, trying to pry open the cracks of their deepest insecurities. For Rowan, it was the sound of Professor McGonagall's disappointed sigh, the image of a scarlet troll on an arithmancy exam, his entire carefully constructed future collapsing around him. He felt his resolve waver, a cold wave of panic threatening to overwhelm him. "Rowan, focus." Luna's voice, sharp and clear, cut through the mental assault. "It's trying to break your concentration on the third rune. Your mind is open." He gasped, drawing his gaze from the phantom grade. He channeled his panic into a fierce determination, pushing back against the encroaching fear. He focused on the glowing runes, on the shared purpose, on Luna's unwavering belief. His own magic surged, a warm counterpoint to Valak's cold. As Vector continued the complex incantation, the runes pulsed faster, like a beating heart. Valak's resistance intensified. The whispers turned into a cacophony of accusatory voices, twisting their past mistakes, mocking their strengths. For Vector, the complex arithmancy equations she'd spent her life perfecting began to blur, to present logical paradoxes that her mind desperately tried to solve, almost derailing the ritual. For Luna, the crypt walls seemed to ripple with grotesque Nargles, their tiny, spindly legs and bulbous eyes leering at her, whispering that she was indeed mad and that no one would ever truly understand her. Yet, Luna stood her ground, her face calm amidst the storm. Rowan felt a cold, unseen hand close around his arm, its touch like death. He visibly recoiled, a gasp tearing from his throat. The fear was physical now, not just mental. He closed his eyes for a split second, seeing a flash of the horrifying nun, Valak's preferred manifestation, its face a rictus of demonic glee. It was trying to break him, to possess him. It's lunging for the focal point. Luna screamed, her composure finally cracking with urgency. It's trying to possess you, Rowan. It senses your fear. Ignore it. Vector yelled, her voice strained, but powerful. Keep the flow, Rowan. The ritual needs your unwavering intent. Rowan opened his eyes, forcing himself to look directly at the breach. He didn't see the nun, but an expanding void, a tearing maw of darkness. He knew, instinctively, that if he gave in to the terror, if he faltered for even a second, Valak would consume him, and then Hogwarts. He thought of his friends, the students who looked to him for answers, the professors who had trusted him. He thought of Luna, standing firm, seeing the unseen, never faltering in her unique truth. A new kind of courage ignited within him, not the courage born of logic or careful planning, but the raw, visceral courage of conviction. He would not fail. He could not fail. He roared, a guttural sound that tore through the whispers, a primal defiance against the ancient evil. He poured every ounce of his magic, every shred of his resolve, into his wand. The surge of power was immense, almost overwhelming. The runes flared blindingly, resonating with his sheer force of will. Ad hoc red ineviter. Ad hoc red ineviter. Vector chanted, her voice growing stronger, aligning with Rowan's renewed strength. Nunc sigillum. The runic circle pulsed one final, incandescent time, contracting rapidly around the breach. Valak, sensing its defeat, let out an unholy shriek, a sound that was pure agony and malice, vibrating through their very bones. It wasn't just a sound, it was a physical force, pushing them back, trying to rip the ritual apart at the last moment. The nun's terrifying face manifested fully within the breach, its eyes burning pits of hellfire, its gaunt hand reaching out, skeletal fingers clawing at the closing aperture. Rowan held fast, his muscles screaming, his magic a roaring river. He met Valak's gaze, not with fear, but with a fierce, protective fire. He saw its weakness now. It truly couldn't touch him if he didn't allow it to. It preyed on the cracks, but he was whole, reinforced by the courage of his allies and his own unbreakable will. With a final, explosive flash of brilliant white light that momentarily blinded them, the breach snapped shut. The horrifying shriek of Valak was abruptly cut off, replaced by a profound, echoing silence. The oppressive cold vanished instantly, replaced by the damp, stale air of the crypt. The brilliant runes faded, leaving only the chalk marks on the stone floor. The oppressive dread lifted, leaving behind a sudden, dizzying lightness. Rowan collapsed, his wand clattering to the floor, his body trembling uncontrollably. He gasped for breath, his lungs burning. Professor Vector slumped against the wall, her face pale, but a look of profound relief washing over her features. Luna, still standing, looked at the now sealed breach, a faint, contented smile gracing her lips. "It's gone," Rowan croaked, his voice raw. "For now, Rowan," Luna murmured, turning to him. Her eyes, no longer wide with frantic warning, held a deep, knowing calm. "The ward's hold." The bleak veil is mended. Vector pushed herself upright, a hand pressed to her chest. That was an experience, she said, her voice shaky but filled with a renewed sense of wonder. An ancient evil, banished by pure will and unorthodox insight. She looked at Luna with something akin to reverence. Your Nargles, Luna, are more real than any equation I've ever seen. Rowan pushed himself into a sitting position, his gaze sweeping over his companions. He was utterly exhausted, but a profound shift had occurred within him. The world was no longer just logic and textbook knowledge. It was vast, terrifying, and beautiful in its strangeness. He looked at Luna, truly looked at her, and saw not an eccentric, but a visionary, a sentinel of truths others could not perceive. He had started this journey dismissing her. He ended it owing her everything. They eventually made their way back through the hidden passages, emerging into the familiar, comforting warmth of Hogwarts. The castle felt different now, cleansed, humming with its usual protective magic. The pervasive dread was gone, replaced by a sense of peace that tasted all the sweeter for having been so hard-won. Students walked with lighter steps, their eyes no longer darting nervously. The fear had truly lifted. In the days and weeks that followed, Hogwarts slowly returned to its former glory. The unsettling incident ceased, the magic flowed freely again, and the students, though forever marked by the chilling experience, began to heal. Rowan Thorne was a changed wizard. He still excelled in his studies, but his perspective had broadened immeasurably. He no longer saw the world through a purely rational lens, but through one tinged with wonder, humility, and a deep respect for the unknown. He sought out Luna more frequently, not to dismiss her, but to genuinely listen, to understand her unique insights. He even found himself musing about the existence of Nargles, not as a joke, but as a possibility. He understood now that some truths lay beyond the reach of conventional magic, beyond even the most intricate arithmancy equations. True wisdom, he realized, lay not just in knowing, but in accepting the limits of what one could know, and in having the courage to face what one couldn't explain. One evening, weeks later, Rowan sat in the Ravenclaw common room, ostensibly reviewing ancient runes for an upcoming essay. His gaze drifted to the window, to the moonlit grounds of Hogwarts, peaceful and serene. He still felt a faint prickle of unease sometimes, a ghost of the deep cold he'd experienced in the crypt. Was Valak truly gone forever? Or merely contained, dormant, waiting for another breach, another moment of fear to prey upon? He would never again be so quick to dismiss the eccentricities of the world. He had seen the bleak veil, and he knew now that the magic they studied in textbooks was but a small part of the vast, terrifying, and utterly magnificent reality that lay hidden just beneath the surface, waiting for those brave enough to look. And as a faint, unexplained chill passed through the common room, stirring the tapestries, Rowan knew, with a certainty that transcended logic, that his journey into the heart of the unknown had only just begun.